Kyle Filipowski is earning minutes for the Utah Jazz, but who he's stealing him from might surprise you next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much on this July 16th for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps as well as YouTube. So thank you for jumping into the everydayers. You're the best. We're going to have a little discussion privately here in a second, just a little bit. Thank you very much. Wednesday edition of the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Greatly appreciate you. Okay, everydayers. Back to talk shows. Everything else. Been around me forever. Do you remember when I had this super radical idea about Major League Baseball, that it was boring and that I played in college and I loved the game? And in 1990, I drove across the country and saw a game in every single stadium. I loved the game and it was horrifically boring and needed to change. And I had a bunch of ideas. And the two primary ideas I had were, one, that you didn't have a batting order and that every player got to hit every inning until there were 3 outs. In other words, if you had the Angels and you had Mike Trout, that you just had him hit at some point in every inning. If you have Shohei Ohtani, he hits at some point, unless you're the Dodgers and you have every all-star, then forget it. You just do whatever you want. But okay, so that was that. Well, they started talking about that this was like 15 years ago. I had this idea, maybe 10. And they started talking about the golden at-bat last year. My other idea was that all games should end that are tied in a home run derby. Because the first reason, by the way, for the first one was, if you go watch LeBron in the NBA, you see 40 minutes of Giannis, you see 40 minutes of Jokic, you see 40 minutes of LeBron. And I went to an Angels game and I saw Mike Trout. This might have been 10 years ago. Yeah. And I saw Mike Trout, and then I waited an hour to see Mike Trout again, and they walked him. And I had to wait another hour to see him again. And that sucked as a viewer experience. The home run derby is because part of sport is that when the bottom line on ESPN, outdated concept, is running, there needs to be something that makes you go to the game. And if you find out that the Yankees and the Angels are in a 4-4 tie in the 8th with a potential home run derby coming with Mike Trout and Aaron Judge, you're going to flip on the television to see that. Well, baseball did it last night with the home run derby to solve the All-Star game. So I just want to say, this crazy fool's not always crazy. Okay. Here's today's show. A few summer league notes. We're going to dig into the expansion news. Trade, it does have the expansion actually impacts the Utah Jazz for 2 reasons. Trade exception. I know we're going to geek out about the trade exception finally. We're starting with Kyle Filipowski stealing minutes in the Jazz rotation from people you don't expect. So I do not believe that Kyle Filipowski can play center in the NBA. Okay? I could be wrong. I've been a little surprised, if I'm perfectly honest, how much center he's played in Summer League. It was my feeling at the end of last year that we saw the Jazz. It was hard after Drew Eubanks got traded. I thought we saw Will Hardy move away from Kyle Filipowski as a center. Earlier this week, on our week of Kyle Filipowski madness, we looked at his B-ball index numbers, and he's an F in rim protection. He'll learn how to position his body better, but he'll never gain length in his arms. That's not going to happen. So I think Kyle Filipowski is a 4. I think Kyle Filipowski is wildly gifted offensively and is earning himself a spot on the floor in the NBA. But I think the Jazz center rotation is Walker Kessler and Yusuf Nurkic, at least if we're going to be decent defensively. And then I think Kyle Filipowski is a 4. I also, if you've noticed, the Jazz have been switching off ball more in Summer League than they did last year. They're not trailing, they're switching. So Kyle, if he plays the 4, is going to have to be able to guard space in isolation. I've got the numbers on all this. We can look at it later in the week, add on to this conversation. But right now, I just want to do the concepts. So if he is not playing center, then he's going to steal minutes from Cody Williams, Brice Sensabaugh, Will Clayton, or Isaiah Collier. Because I don't think you're stealing minutes from Taylor Hendricks at this point, and I don't think you're stealing minutes from Ace Bailey at this point. If Hendricks is healthy, I think he'll play. He has to. And you're not stealing minutes from Lowry. So Filipowski's playing the 4. Hendricks is really only a 4 at this point. I've seen some people talking about Bailey as a 2. I don't think he has the handle or the ball movement to do that. Truthfully, Bailey's a 4, we're sliding to a 3, and Lowry's a 4, we're sliding to a 3. But I think you're going to have Kessler and Nurkic as your centers. Lowry, Filipowski, Hendricks, and Bailey intermixing as your 3-4s then. Really, with Filipowski and Hendricks playing 4s, Lowry sliding to a 3, Ace sliding to a 3. And if for some reason Filipowski and Hendricks are both suddenly playing 24 minutes, at least 24 minutes a night, we now have a little bit of actually a quagmire there where Lowry's going to want 32 and we're going to want to have Ace Bailey playing a lot more than 16. What it's going to do, it's going to slide Cody Williams down in to the guard line. And then I don't think anyone's stealing Keontae George minutes. Then the question is, who wins the minutes between Cody Williams, Brice Sensabaugh, Will Clayton, and Isaiah Collier? Because, again, I don't think Kyle Filipowski is the center. Okay? Now, you solve all of this by playing Kyle as the center. And we can do that, but I don't think it's a viable long-term answer on how you're going to win basketball games. I could be wrong. Happens all the time. Wasn't wrong on Major League Baseball, though. Just thought I'd point that out. Who goes back to their take 10 years ago and tries to prove it right? Only me. So I think Keontae, what's interesting here is right now I think we all think our point guards are Clayton and Collier. Well, if Collier doesn't shoot well and suddenly not on it, well, then maybe the point guards are Keontae George and Will Clayton. And we're back to Keontae being the point guard, and your shooting guard is Brice Sensabaugh and Cody Williams. Or if Cody doesn't step forward and has his kind of absent stretches, then maybe it is Clayton and Collier, and it's George and Sensabaugh. But then your 3s are Ace, Bailey, and Lowry Markkanen, with your 4s being Filipowski and Hendricks. And they're all intermixing. It's possible, right? Kyle Anderson also could get some minutes in here somewhere. Steve Mihailuk is the fill-in. As he just either starts or doesn't play, he'll have the exact same role. But the trickle-down effect, to me, if Kyle Filipowski playing well, being this much of an offensive force, showing that he's ready to really have an impact of games offensively in the NBA, still comes back to where can he possibly play defensively? I don't think it's at the 5. And so therefore, if he slides to the 4, he takes minutes from someone else. Now, someone's out there saying, and they'll be in the chat room, why would you possibly play Jusuf Nurkic over Kyle Filipowski? That's not really what you're doing. What you're doing is you're creating viable minutes for everybody on the floor. And Jusuf Nurkic can play center in the NBA, play it viably as a backup center. You probably play it well. And that allows you to have some sort of semblance. And then you're going to switch 1 through 4. The question is going to be whether Kyle, let me just say it this way. I think Kyle's got a way better chance to be on the floor defensively switching 1 through 4 than I do think playing drop big 5. And I'm not sure so then the next question is, can Kyle play 1 through 5 switching? And can we still rebound well enough and still defend well enough? And I don't think we can. Now, maybe it's going to turn out if you're playing Kyle 1 through 5 switching with Hendricks and Bailey, not a lot of ball handling. Kyle does the ball handling. there's enough secondary rim defense you can get away with it. There's a lot of versatility to play around here and play with. Maybe that's the scenario where you get Kyle playing center, is 1 through 5 switching with Hendricks and Bailey, who are then helping out on rim defense. But Kyle cannot play drop 5. I'm pretty comfortable with that. And having it, he can do it. Not that he can't physically do it. He can't do it and have an impact on the game. So you could switch it 1 through 5 with Kyle, but you better have some other rim defense. And I don't love Kyle switching 1 through 5. And I don't love switching 1 through 5, frankly. But maybe that's the answer. Kyle's going to have to switch defensively. I think he's better off switching out of the 4 and then playing out of the 4. But maybe offensively, he's so much better at the 5, you have to slide him to 5. But if you don't slide him to the 5, what I'm telling you is he interestingly starts to steal guard minutes. And that's where the season, it's going to be fascinating to watch how this all plays out. All right. Trade exception talk. My goodness gracious, could you be more excited? But actually, the Jazz getting trade exception for John Collins has a unique time and place where it will be most valuable and a potential asset for the Utah Jazz. That's next on Locked on Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Intercap Lending. For the last 7 years, we've had a relationship with Intercap Lending so that you can get the best loan experience possible. And it all comes from our own personal loan officer, Steve Carter. So Intercap Lending is an interesting company. They're a mortgage company that's been kind of shaking things up by making home loans more accessible, straightforward, and personal. And the other thing they do is that they get most underwriting done in 24 hours, where most banks take 4 to 7 days. They also are servicing over 60% of their own loans. That's how they can do this. So if you're buying a first home, refinancing, exploring options as a veteran, Intercap is there to guide you. Then part 2 of it is Steve Carter. So Intercap's part 1. Part 2 is that Steve Carter is our own dedicated loan officer. He's the best customer service person I have ever been around in my entire life. So you're not just a number, you're a locked on VIP, and Steve Carter treats you better than anyone on the planet. So find out, just like all of our other reviews that have come in, that literally Steve Carter is the greatest customer service person you'll ever deal with. Katie Pennington wrote, I've worked with Steve on 3 loans. He gets the loan together quickly and is great to work with. Derek wrote, super easy to work with, got us approved and closed on a house in under 3 weeks. The app makes everything a breeze. So email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. And I will get you set up with Steve Carter for a VIP treatment with Intercap Lending. That's dlock09@gmail.com. If you don't want to involve me, you can call Steve directly at 385-800-8528. Do tell me you're locked on. 385-800-8528. Today's show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Money's intimidating for a lot of people, but what Monarch Money does is let you have the opportunity to have your own personal CFO in your pocket, on your phone, wherever, and looking at your finances and being in the driver's seat. Give yourself full visibility, control your situation, and actually see what a good job you're doing. I think that's like forgotten about here. It's more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place. And you can say like, oh, we're doing great. We can take a bigger vacation. Oh, we're doing great. We should get a pat on the back. Oh, we're doing great. We can get this. Or, oh, we need to save to get this car so we can do this. Whatever it might be, Monarch Money will walk you down the path and get you and make sure you're all on the same page. If you're sharing finances with someone, Monarch Money is great because you can really monitor what's going on. If you have one financial goal you want to get serious about, Monarch Money will take you there. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Monarchmoney.com, LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Oh my gosh, are you so excited? It's trade exception talk. Okay, let's see if we can do this. The Jazz, when they traded John Collins, got a trade exception. And they didn't just get a trade exception, they got a huge trade exception. They got a trade exception for $26.6 million. Okay, what is a trade exception? A trade exception allows you to bring a player in on a deal for that amount of money without having to send a player back. You can send the trade exception back. Okay. That's the easiest, simplest way I can say it. So instead of having to trade $25 million salary for $25 million salary, if you are under the aprons, which we will, you can trade for any player under $26.6 million into that trade exception and here's the key, and send the trade exception back to the other team. Okay. So let's say at the deadline, and this is an important time to discuss this. Let's say at the deadline, the Boston Celtics have not gotten under the second apron yet. And they want to move Anthony Simons somewhere. Okay? And Anthony Simons, I don't know his contract, but I'm just using this as an example. Let's assume it's less than $26 million. I can look it up. And Boston trades Anthony Simons somewhere to get off of his deal so that they get under the cap. But the problem is or under the aprons, but the problem for Boston, so Simons does not work because it's 27.6. But just go with it. The problem for Boston at that point is that they would have to still take back $27.6 million. But if they then take the poo-poo platter of players that they get for Anthony Simons and redirect them for the Jazz in exchange for that trade exception, then they've cleared their books. Okay? The advantage here is that the Jazz have 12 months where they can acquire a player for $26.5 million. They don't have to use their mid-level exception to do it. But the biggest thing that the trade exception gives the Jazz is the Jazz will be right at the salary floor. We're not there yet. There's a lot of terminology here. So feel free, I will go back and check the YouTube comment section or my Twitter today to see if something doesn't make sense here, and I will explain it tomorrow if I blow it. Okay, this is the key to the whole thing. The trade exception has 12 months until it expires. The key time for the Jazz is going to be at the trade deadline, not at free agency. The Jazz will already have a ton of cap space in free agency. And you cannot sign a player directly into your trade exception unless you sign and trade them. Okay? So makes sense? Like in free agency, the Jazz cannot just go, okay, I want to sign this player for $25 million, put him in the trade exception. It has to be a sign and trade. Okay? When the trade exception is going to be at its highest value is at the trade deadline. Because the Jazz will be at the salary floor, which is 90% of the salary cap. They have to be. We have to get there at some point here in the next 2 months. Most teams that have a trade exception or something of that sort are buttressed up against one of the aprons in a manner that they can't take in the money and just give back out the trade exception, or else it's going to push them too high. But the Jazz will have the most wiggle room between where they are at the apron and where they are at the floor and an apron to be able to take in a trade exception. Let me say that again, because that's the key to this whole thing. That when we get to the trade deadline and teams need to dump some money, okay, the Jazz will have the largest wiggle room from the salary floor up to an apron that will allow them at the trade deadline to bring something into that trade exception that almost no other team in the NBA has. Brooklyn was able to negotiate some stuff in free agency right now because they were really the only team along with Detroit that had some cap space. Will be the only team at the deadline that has enough room from our current salary to bring in $26 million, not push us over an apron and relieve someone of their financial burden, should be valuable at that point. Either likely picks value, not player. That would be my guess, is that someone needs to get under a cap or an apron, and to do it, we're the conduit to get it done, and there's a price to that. It might be that we can get a player out of it as well, into that trade exception. But that's the timing on this. So there's been a lot of talk that the trade exception is going to be valuable, and it's nice because it goes to July 8th or 7th or 8th and takes us into free agency next year. But the Jazz will have cap space then anyway, and that would be a sign and trade to not use cap space. But if we're using cap space, we're not getting the exceptions because we're using cap space. If we're playing under the cap. So the trade exception time is going to be at the deadline. Okay. Hit me with a question. Hit me on YouTube, and then I'll probably have to go ask somebody the question, but it'll give me enough time. So feel free, because I may not have that answer. Is the NBA not going to expand? Maybe not. Next on Locked on Jazz. Yesterday, the Board of Governors met, and this does impact you slightly as a Jazz fan, about expansion. And there's really big mixed reports on this. It just depends how you interpret what took place. So on one level, the word is that they're exploring expansion. The bigger word is that there is a cadre of owners who are against this. The league just signed an 11-year, $76 billion TV deal, which means that over the course of this TV deal, each team is going to get $2.5 billion. Okay. What they don't want to do is divide their $76 million amongst 32 teams and only get $2.3 billion. That'll cost them $200 million each. The league expansion rate right now is at 30 million, is at 6 billion. And if you, ironically enough, divide that amongst 30 teams, that's exactly $200 million. So the first thing is there's zero chance this is happening at $6 billion expansion fee for whoever's coming in. It's going to have to be upwards of 8, but that's only making each of these owners an extra $65 million. So it might not be worth it to them. If you're adding Seattle and Vegas, you're not adding much TV contract. What the league wants to do is add Mexico City. That's why there's a G League team there. They're trying. You add Mexico City, you add an entirely brand new audience, and your league is tapped into something nobody else has. That's what the league wants. And so I could very easily see the league kick this can down the road trying to get Mexico City ready. I also believe that and there's no real value from like the way we're doing things to going to 32 teams from 30. There's some things where it'd be better for the NBA Cup, and that's about it. The second one I would say, and I might be making this up in my head, but the math on this for an NBA owner is not dramatically better to bring in 2 teams. You're just not gaining a lot. I know it's crazy. 60 million is not a lot, but it's not a lot when your team's worth $5 billion. So just to try to put this in perspective, that's if you have $5,000 and someone's offering you $60, you don't care, right? If you have 500,000 and someone's offering you 6,000, you probably don't care. That's the equivalent. What the NBA owners are going to want is something that changes the dynamic of what the league is. I think the league dynamic changes Europe. And I don't know how we do it. And I don't know how the travel works. But I actually think what the league probably should do, and this kills me because I want Seattle. Well, they should go to Seattle and Vancouver is what they should actually do. You tap into Vancouver. That's actually a pretty big market size. You should go to Seattle and Vancouver and go to 32 teams and move on. But and then trade 2 teams to the East, probably New Orleans and Memphis. Okay, that's one possibility. The other is that you wait to expand to 34. You don't do Mexico City. You do London, Paris, Barcelona. You decide. Rome's not that close. I don't know what you want as your 4th city there. Berlin, maybe. So London, Berlin, Paris, Barcelona. Easy travel. That would probably be my 4. And the NBA moves to Europe. And you have added 4 teams. Better if you can track 2 American teams, but that's a side note. And you make it so that every time you go to Europe, you play a 4-game road trip. And you come back and somehow get some acclimation period. I don't know exactly how you do travel, but for the amount of money that the league could get for expanding into 4 teams in Europe, guess what? You figure it out. It's easy for the East Coast teams. It's fairly easy for the Central. And for LA, it's really hard. So it's probably a 6-game to 7-game road trip where you go to LA, you go play New York, and then you go over and play 4 games in Europe, and you come back and play Brooklyn, Philly, and then you come back to, you work your way, you probably play Brooklyn, and then you probably play Chicago, Milwaukee, and then you work your way back to LA, and it's brutal, and you do it once a year. But it's totally doable. It might be where you reduce games at that point because you need more rest. And you've got so much more money because of the fact of this. Here's where all this impacts you. The holdup on all of this is the collapse of the local TV deals. Now, the Jazz were very forward-thinking. Ryan Smith was ahead of the game and went to the Jazz Plus and the K-Jazz. And the amount of money that they were making on regional deals compared to what Ryan Smith is now making is Ryan Smith is losing a ton of money on this deal. I don't know if he's specifically losing money on Jazz Plus and K-Jazz deal. Guessing he probably is, but don't know. But compared to what they were getting, losing a ton of money. The league is losing over $1 billion from the loss of local TV deal. And you're seeing that in the fact that the salary cap is going down in a year for the first time ever. The league is going to try to unify, it seems, the local TV deals. Now, what does this do to the over-the-air K-Jazz deal or something like that? I don't know. But my guess is that by the 27-28 season, there will be a unified NBA regional local streaming deal that involves, Sports Business Journal wrote about this, Tom Friend does great work, probably 20 teams will be involved. If you go into it, Boston and New York and the Clippers and the Lakers and a few others, so those are big teams, have TV deals, Sacramento, that run into the 30s. So they're not going to be available. But there's about 20 teams, Jazz included, that don't have TV deals or that their TV deals are going to expire by 27, 28. I would expect that becomes, for example, an Amazon Prime TV deal where you have to have Amazon Prime to get your team. It's regionally blocked. It's all through the Amazon Prime app. And you're getting your local TV deal that way. That's how you get your Jazz game. It might mean that K-Jazz goes away. I have no idea. It might. But this will have an impact on you as a consumer, is that the league is going to try to unify its local TV streaming deal because it's lost $1 billion universally on local TV deals, which you can see because the salary cap's going down next year. That was the tell. And Adam Silver said yesterday, we will not do any expansion until we have our local TV deal figured out. Which also tells you that there is a local TV deal to figure out here soon. So all the pieces of this puzzle are there for you to put together, and how it's going to impact you is going to be super interesting. One of the things that was interesting is there was a quote in there that the teams that have done over the air, so KJazz free, have been surprised at how little coverage they're getting. I don't know if this is the Jazz, the Pelicans, there's about 5 teams, the Suns, or who's doing it. But one of the models that those 5 or 6 teams that have gone over the air we're hoping for is that you've expanded your audience so much that you can increase your sales revenue from your ads. If that's not happening, the incentive to have free TV is over for the owners, and everything will go back behind the paywall. All right. Hopefully you found that interesting. There'll be a lot of, that's what we got for the summer. That is Locked on Jazz today. Jazz play tonight. We'll keep an eye on that one. See how John Tonje does in a second. See if Ace Bailey plays. If he doesn't play today, I'd be surprised if he plays in the finale in Chicago. But hopefully we'll get 2 Ace Bailey games before we're done. Don't think that Will Clayton hamstring's coming back, but we'll see. And maybe we'll see some of the guys out there. Right now, we'll send you, if you want to follow me on socials, it's DLock09. And right now, we send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel, Locked on NBA on video. Check out Locked on NBA on audio. Have a great one.